Hi, I'm Carole McGranahan. I'm an associate professor of cultural anthropology here at the University of Colorado. My research focuses on Tibet and the Himalayas. I specifically work with Tibetan refugees and with Tibetans in India, Nepal, and now also in North America with Tibetans living in New York City and Toronto. My initial research was on questions of identity, history, and memory in the Tibetan refugee community in India and Nepal. And I approached these questions through a study of the Tibetan Resistance Army. And this was a guerrilla army that Tibetans independently rose up in their villages to defend their homes, their leaders, then most especially their religion, against invading Chinese armies in the 1950s. And so the research I did is both anthropological and historical, and then it looks at the history of what happened, as well as the anthropology of this history. Basically, how is it that people live the past in the present? You know, what is the relationship between history and memory at a state level, so in terms of global politics, but also in terms of a very embodied everyday level. One of the things I ask is, what does it mean to live with and to bear a history that's not remembered, you know, that is forgotten on a national level? And my next project, well, ostensibly on entirely different topics, is very linked in terms of thinking of questions of political possibility, political subjectivity, and participation in one's community. And the questions that it asks are different. It looks at why Tibetans in India and Nepal have rejected obtaining citizenship in those countries for 50 years. And then about 10, 15 years ago, Tibetans kind of slowly, but in a statistically significant number, started immigrating to North America, to both the United States and Canada. And one of the things that they've done here, speaking in Boulder, but in the United States, is they have sought to get citizenship. And they've done the same thing in Canada. And the argument they make is kind of entirely cancels out the argument they made for 50 years in India and Nepal, which is that to get citizenship is going to allow them to advance their political cause and to kind of give their political claims new substance. I got interested in anthropology when I was an undergraduate, and I wanted to study abroad. Everyone from my college went to London or Paris, places where you can do interesting anthropology, but I wanted to go someplace different. And I stumbled across a program to Nepal. And I opened up the catalog, and it said, Nepal is a country of superlatives, and it just captured my middle class, middle American imagination. And I ended up going to Nepal for a semester, my junior year of college. And I was just exposed to a whole new way of thinking about the world, of being in the world. As part of my study abroad program, we had to do a 1-month independent study, a research project that we designed by ourselves, that we conducted by ourselves, wrote up, you know, wrote up the findings afterwards. And so I decided I wanted to do an ethnographic anthropological research project. And so I went and I lived in a village down in the Terai region of Nepal, which is the jungle, kind of near the border with India, and I did a very classic, almost old-fashioned anthropological village study. And to this day, it remains one of the most meaningful research experiences I've had, because it was my first time really, not just stepping outside of my comfort zone in terms of travel, but in terms of living with the people and trying to sink into the everyday rhythms of life, getting into what it means to do participant observation, which is not just to watch, but to be a part of a community and to really think culturally about what that means, what it means to open yourself up to thinking about all the varied ways and all the very specific ways that people live in the world. So for me, that was sort of the beginning of it all. One thing that's nice about the Department of Anthropology here at the University of Colorado is the size. We're sort of a small and intimate program spread across 3 subdisciplines. There's cultural anthropology, biological anthropology, and archaeology. And each incoming class for those subdisciplines is roughly about 5 people. So you come in with a group of fellow students who you get to know really well. So one of the things that often surprises students when they get here is that actually most of their classes are in anthropology. Right, so most of your curriculum will be taking anthropology classes, perhaps taking language classes, maybe some what we call geographic area classes to kind of learn the history of a region. But actually, I think University of Colorado is a good place for interdisciplinary learning, and there are lots of cognate disciplines that would really make sense for students coming here to think about taking classes in. One would be the geography department, which has a number of cultural and human geographers just doing really fantastic work in all sorts of places around the world. It's just incredibly sharp, provocative, and productive productive for anthropologists to be thinking with as well, questions of space and place that really are nice to think with in terms of culture. And we have a very strong history department as well. And then, just around campus, so many places with excellent faculty, whether it's women's studies, ethnic studies, sociology, communication, all sorts of places. So it's one thing where you kind of come here and all of a sudden your whole world becomes anthropology, and yet at the same time it opens to other disciplines in ways that are very specifically focused and can really be productive and just add another element, another level of depth, to your studies. So.